Hello, check, check. If you are in the chat room, please write me and let me know that you can hear me. I'll take that as a yes. Let's wait for a few minutes and make sure that everybody who wants to join us can get online. Oh, good. Thank you. I see you answering me in the chat room. Wonderful. Hello, if you're just joining us, this is Jesse. I'm going to wait for a few more minutes for everybody who wants to join to get online. Welcome, new viewers. We're just waiting a few minutes for everybody who wants to get online to join us. Hello and welcome. This is Jesse. Let's give it a minute or two for everybody who wants to join us to get online. Hello and welcome. I'm going to wait one more minute for everybody who wants to get online to join us, and then we're going to start. All right. Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Jesse Davis. I'm in New York City. I'm a Python and C programmer. I work for MongoDB. This is the PyLadies Remote event for the Global Diversity CFP Day workshop. I was invited to give this workshop by Anna Osowski, and a lot of the stuff that I'm going to tell you today is based on the work of Lacey Williams Henschel, who gave this workshop online 2 years ago. I'm going to share a link with you at the end, which will take you to a page on my website that includes like Lacey's slides and a video recording of her version of this workshop, as well as any other resources that I tell you about today. All of that stuff is going to be on a page, which I will share a link for you at the end, so you don't need to worry about taking notes right now. So I'm going to share my slides with you, um, even though it's a little impersonal to only be looking at my keynote. Um, there's going to be some good information on here. So the first thing to get out of the way is that if you want to participate online, I've got my iPad here that's logged in here. Go to talk.io/PyLadies Remote. That's tlk.io/PyLadies Remote. And if you log into this chat window, then we can interact while I'm doing the workshop, and I'll sort of be glancing down at that chat window from time to time. So if you ask me a question, I'll try to answer it in real time. And then we'll also do some question and answer at the end. The next thing to take care of is that this is a PyLadies online event, and that means that we abide by the PyLadies Code of Conduct. So PyLadies is dedicated to providing a respectful, harassment-free community for everyone. We don't tolerate harassment or bullying of any community member in any form. Harassment includes offensive verbal or electronic comments related to personal characteristics or choices, sexual images or comments in public or online spaces, intimidation, bullying, stalking, following, harassing, disruption of talks or meetings, or unwelcome sexual attention. Participants asked to stop any harassing or bullying behavior are expected to comply immediately. So let's all abide by this code of conduct, and please let me know immediately if you see any violations of this code. All right, so the bureaucracy is out of the way. What is this workshop about? There are a lot of materials online for how to give talks, like public speaking tips. And there's even a lot of stuff online about how to write a tech talk, or, books about how to deliver a TED talk, how to deliver a winning presentation. There is somewhat less available about proposing talks. How do you write the proposal that will get you accepted by a software conference's program committee? So that's what today's workshop is about. Now, that means that you're going to be making a promise which you don't necessarily know how to fulfill yet. If you haven't given a talk before and you're writing a proposal, that means that you're promising that you can deliver a talk even though you don't yet know how necessarily to do that. If you stick with me to the end, I'm going to offer you 2 prizes, which I hope will help you to overcome that problem. But for today, we're just going to focus on how do you write the proposal. Now, let me tell you what my experience is, and I promise that this is going to be super quick because I know that introducing myself is boring. But I do want to tell you where I'm coming from. About 6 years ago, I decided to start a public speaking career, speaking at open source software conferences. And I went from nothing, like I'd never spoken at a conference, I'd hardly even been to a conference, and no open source leaders knew who I was, to somebody who's given dozens of talks at dozens of conferences all over the world, including a keynote presentation in a Python conference in Barcelona. And I've spoken at PyCon every year since I think 2015. I've spoken at OSCON and MongoDB World and a bunch of other big places. But that doesn't mean that I've got this all nailed down. When I first started proposing talks, I was rejected for a year straight. I got into no conferences at all. And even now, most of my proposals are rejected. If I propose talks to 10 conferences this year, I would expect to get into, say, 4 or 5 of them. There's really no way to completely guarantee the ability to get a talk accepted by a conference. There's really no substitute for just playing the numbers. But you can strategize, and that's what we're going to talk about today. One of the things that's made me a better strategist is that I am now on the program committees for MongoDB World and for PyGotham. After spending years being rejected by program committees, I decided to turn the tables and join program committees so that I could do some of the rejecting. Besides working out my revenge fantasies, though, I also got to learn how program committees work. And that means that I'm a much more strategic proposer to other conferences' program committees now. I'm going to share with you a lot of what I learned from serving on program committees. How does a program committee work? How do they actually run the call for proposals process? I'm going to tell you how PyGotham's proposal process worked. I will go through it quickly, and you can see then how strategically writing your proposals in a way that are planned to get through the program committee will help you get a higher acceptance rate. So here's how it works. First of all, last year, PyGotham, we announced our CFP, and we did that through various mailing lists, blog posts, Twitter. You want to be aware of conferences that are announcing open CFPs, and the link that I'll share with you at the end will have a whole list of like mailing lists and calendars that you can use to keep track of this sort of thing. So we announced to the world that our CFP was open, and we encouraged people to propose talks to us. Now, the way a CFP is usually managed is that there's a website where you fill out a form and hit submit. We used papercall.io, which I think a lot of conferences are now standardizing on. But whatever it is, you can pretty much expect to be confronted with a blank web form that you have to fill out your title, your abstract, your outline, and so on in. So we announced our CFP, and the CFP is open for maybe 2 months while we are gathering people's proposals. And during this period, we did a bunch of outreach. We got onto various local Python meetups mailing lists. We asked prominent Python people to retweet our announcement. And we ran one local workshop with the local New York City PyLadies, where we helped people to brainstorm and to refine their proposals. We also reached out to a lot of affinity groups. We were really interested in getting the most diverse set of speakers proposing talks that we could. So we reached out to like Black Girls Code and to various affinity groups for people who are members of groups underrepresented in tech. So one way to make sure that you hear about conference CFPs and that you can benefit from these sort of outreach efforts is to join your local meetups so that conferences know where to find you. So after about 2 months, the CFP closes, and we ran a public voting period. Not a lot of conferences, I think, do this, but we wanted input from the wider Python community. So we set up a website where people could log in and then mark each talk as being either good for PyGotham, not good for PyGotham, or neutral. Public voting lasted a couple of weeks, and then we shut down the voting site, and we did batch voting by the committee. Now, a batch of talks is a group of talks which are similar topics. So, for example, we had a ton of talks about Python web frameworks. So we wanted all of those talks about similar topics to be ranked head-to-head so that we could pick the best one for each of the topics that we wanted to address in our conference. The best talks we judged partly by their public voting counts, but more by our personal judgment. We are experienced conference speakers ourselves in many cases, or we've seen a lot of talks, or we've judged a lot of talks in the past. So based on the title, abstract, and outline, we tried to guess which of these proposals was most likely to result in a good talk at our conference. The other thing about this portion of the selection process is that we hid the names of the speakers from ourselves. We wanted to not know whether the speaker was well known and not be able to guess the speaker's gender or ethnicity based on their name. So we got through this whole period without knowing who any of the speakers was. Once we had come up with a kind of a draft set of talks, the best one or two in each sort of topic batch, we de-anonymized the talks. Our main goal here was to make sure that if too many conference organizers had had their talks accepted, that we could cut those and replace them with outsiders' talks. We also wanted to make sure that no single speaker had more than one talk accepted. That was something that PyGotham was committed to, but not all conferences will enforce that. But certainly if you have more than 2 talks accepted, you probably won't get a third. We replaced the talks that we had to cut as a result of this process with talks that were kind of on the waiting list. At this point, because we could guess gender and ethnicity based on the speaker's name, we particularly emphasized getting more women and members of other underrepresented groups in tech speaking at our conference, and came up with a draft schedule. We emailed speakers to make sure that they still wanted to give their talks. At this point, it was up to, say, 3.5 months after people had originally proposed their talks, if they had proposed as soon as the CFP opened. So in a reasonable number of cases, speakers who had originally offered to speak had to withdraw. And so we replaced those with speakers off our wait list. Okay, that was a lot of stuff. Why does this matter to you? At each point in this process, your proposal has different strengths that can help it to win each phase of the CFP process. So first of all, some conference committees run a public voting period. Check when you're proposing to a conference whether there will be a public voting period or not. And if it does, the thing that will likely get you votes are useful or hip topics, new programming languages, exciting new technologies, things that everybody's talking about on Hacker News, and then also puns or rhymes or just funny titles, things with exclamation points and jokes. Frankly, superficial aspects of your proposal are the most important thing at this point to get you votes. Conference committees care about this stuff too. A good title never hurts, but it's mainly the public voting period where the title counts most. Next, the batch voting period. And this is what you want to really think about the most. This is the part where you can be the most strategic. So a distinctive talk, which is to say a talk that is not competing with a very, very similar talk from other speakers, has a better chance of being accepted than a talk that's kind of generic. So rather than, say, proposing a talk about how to test stuff in Python, you might propose a distinctive talk about why PyTest is the best of the Python testing frameworks. You'll be more likely to be accepted because you won't be competing with a possibly better talk that's almost exactly like yours. The other thing is that the conference committee is very concerned that they are choosing proposals that are going to result in good talks. At PyGotham, I think we had maybe 30 or 35 slots to fill. PyCon has 60 or 70, but each of those slots, they can only pick maybe 1 out of 10 of the talks that are proposed to them. Every talk that the program committee accepts had better be super high quality, had better be a great value for their participants, because there are so many other talks that they have to reject in order to accept this one. So you want to prove that you are going to be well prepared, that you are going to give a good talk, that the talk is going to be accurate, and that it's going to finish on time. So for all of these, It helps to be, correctly spelled and punctuated. It helps to have a very thorough outline. The outline should be long enough to show that you've thought in detail about what you're going to say. In many cases, it might even help to put, say, the number of minutes that each paragraph is going to take in the talk outline. PyCon started asking that of all speakers this year. But even if the conference committee doesn't ask you for that, it can't hurt. You want to choose a topic that fills a gap. So based on what the conference asks for, the conference will usually tell you what topics they're interested in. Look at previous years and see which of those topic areas had fewer talks in it in the previous years. Chances are that that will be a less competitive area for you to compete in this year at that conference. The other way that you can make sure that you are not being outcompeted by other similar talks is just to propose, say, 3 or 4 talks for each conference. The conference committee doesn't mind that you're hitting them with a bunch of proposals all from the same speaker. And if those 3 or 4 proposals that you offer are each within the sort of topic area of the conference, but as distinct from each other as possible, then you've got a great chance. So I often like to propose, say, 1 or 2 very technical talks about Python, say a Python internals talk and a talk about a particular Python programming technique. And then I might also propose a talk that is about like leadership strategy or something about organizing the community or something about open source culture. By kind of spreading the talks around, some advanced, some beginner, some soft skills, some technical skills, you've got a much better chance of having at least one of your proposals accepted. But as you are stretching your talks across the widest range of topics possible, still make sure that they're all solidly within the conference's goals. The conference organizers will tell you in the CFP what their goals are. Make sure that accepting your talk will help them advance your goals. Finally, if the conference is doing anonymous talk selection, then they won't see your name, they won't know who you are, and they probably won't read your notes to the organizers before they de-anonymize. So most CFP forms have a private field in them, notes to the organizers, and that's where you want to tell them about your past speaking experience, your technical qualifications for giving this talk. The conference organizers won't see that stuff until they de-anonymize your proposal, because it will probably tell them exactly who you are by like including links to YouTube videos of talks that you've given in the past. So once you've been de-anonymized, that's when the conference committee will see that stuff. So you want your notes to the organizers to really convince them that you're going to give a great talk. First of all, this is where you tell them why you are skilled in the area that you're giving a talk about. And also, you want to include links to videos of yourself speaking in the past. This is really the best thing. If you've got videos of yourself speaking at a meetup or at a conference, that's gold. It proves that you can engage the audience and be fun and educational. If you don't have that, though, like the next best thing is just to at least show that you have given talks. So list the, any places that you've spoken before. If you've spoken at a conference, that's best. Speaking at meetups, you could have taught a class or a webinar or given an internal corporate presentation. Any of that is good evidence that you can give a good talk at a conference. And finally, I believe that good writing and good speaking are tightly correlated. So if you've published articles that you're proud of online, linking to that stuff, especially if it's on the same topic as the talk that you are proposing, that can really help to calm the organizers' nerves as well. and convince them that you're going to give a good conference talk. The way to find CFPs, it's pretty easy. Follow this link, which is at emptily/CFPS. That's empti.ly/CFPS. That's the page on my blog that will give you links to all of the information that you need after this workshop. And it will include mailing lists, Twitter accounts, calendar feeds, everywhere that you'd need to go in order to find the open CFPs for conferences that are in your field of expertise. Okay, so let's talk about brainstorming. First, I'm going to mute myself for a second and take. All right, I'm back. So the question is, where are you going to find the ideas that you need for proposing to conferences? And the important thing to think of here, whenever I talk to inexperienced conference speakers, they so frequently say, I want to speak at a conference, but I haven't done anything special to talk about. And I think that stems from a misunderstanding about what software conferences are like. They're not like academic conferences. So an academic conference, you read a paper which is about something novel that you've done that is extremely advanced and specialized and has advanced the state of the art in your field. That is the total opposite of what your software conference talk is going to be about. You need your talk to a software conference to be entertaining and of broad interest and educational. Okay? And that's it. So if you talk about something that you yourself have done, chances are that what you did is going to be too specialized and too advanced to be of broad interest. And it's going to be too hard to communicate in a half-hour or 40-minute conference talk. So it's not really going to be educational because it's going to be too hard to communicate. And that's true whether you think of yourself as an extremely experienced programmer or not. Everything that we do every day tends to be extremely specialized and detailed work, and it's not of broad interest or educational to conference attendees. Plus, it's probably not going to be very entertaining. So what you want to do is find an area of broad interest that people want to learn about. So they might want to learn about how to choose a web framework, how to ensure that their code is thoroughly tested, how to do performance profiling in Python, how to choose a programming language, how to integrate Go and Python together. You want to almost think of this as like a graduate seminar that a reasonably large number of conference attendees would be interested in going to your talk to learn what you have to tell them. And it should also be fun. Program committees really don't want people to be falling asleep in chairs, and going to even a handful of talks every day is hard at a conference. So you want to convince people that your talk is also going to be fun. Here's an example of some of the successful proposals that I've been shopping around to conferences over the last few years. What is async? How does it work? And when should I use it? That was my first PyCon talk that was accepted. And I haven't implemented async in Python. Other people did that before me. It's not a novel or a new topic. Async is a very old technique. And I'm not the leading expert on this topic. There are lots and lots of people who understand this topic better than me. But it's confusing to a lot of people. It's a great thing to learn as an intermediate Python programmer. And so I proposed to talk to the program committee for PyCon that I was going to explain what async was, how it works, and when you should use it. So as educational as of broad interest, lots of people want to know. And I also convinced them that it was going to be fun because I said that I was going to use an analogy that async code is like warming up pizza, whereas synchronous code is like making a sandwich. It's not even a very original analogy, but it's good enough to be fun. And it convinced the program committee that I was going to give a good talk. And that was essentially the launch of my public speaking career. Other examples are March to Triumph as a mentor. I think that this got into more conferences than any other proposal I've written so far. Mentoring. Everybody is interested in how to help other people learn to code better. I'm not the leading expert. I didn't advance the field, but I came up with a good framework for explaining my approach to the topic. And I think that these soft skills topics are not very competitive slots. So conferences just eat this one up. I traveled all over the world giving this talk. And a talk that I've got high hopes for this year is called What to Expect When You're Expiring, Safety Rules for Dell. This is about Python garbage collecting and some of the surprising behaviors of Python object destructors. So it's an intermediate talk. I think that it's applicable to any Python programmer because sooner or later you're going to either write a Dell method or have to debug one. And it's fun because it's got a fun title, What to Expect When You're Expiring. So think of proposals that you've got in you like this. It's okay if you don't think that anything that you've written yourself is some incredible new piece of software that you have to share with everybody. That's not what this is about at all. I talked to a prominent Python public speaker a year or two ago named Ned Batchelder. I think that his technique is the best way to come up with proposals like this. Ned spends a lot of time at meetups in person and on Stack Overflow and mailing lists. So every year he hears a bunch of people asking questions about Python. So he just thinks back over the year and he thinks, what's the question that he's heard most often? And then he thinks real hard about the best way to explain a really good answer to that question. And this Unicode sandwich example that I've linked to here is a really great example. And you don't need to write this link down. That's on the same page as the emptily/CFP's page where everything is linked from. This is like the gold standard for a common question, which is, how do I deal with Unicode correctly in Python and why do I keep getting errors? And it's a really good answer to it, which is just beautifully and clearly explained. I always sort of go back to this and try to get myself a little bit closer to this standard. Ultimately, what you really want to do is talk about something that you really care about and talk about it in a way that is authentic for you. When Lacey gave this workshop a couple of years ago, she said that this talk by our friend Adrian Lowe called Bake the Cookies, Wear the Dress is the masterclass in authentically expressing yourself. It's both a talk about authentically expressing yourself and it's an example of doing that in action. When Adrian started speaking at software conferences, she wasn't sure if she should present herself the way she really was, as somebody who loves to bake and cook, somebody who likes to dress up in a feminine way. And these things didn't seem to fit the stereotype of an expert software developer. And so she was concerned about whether she should allow people to see her as she really is. By the time I met her at PyTennessee a few years ago, she had decided that she was going to bake the cookies and wear the dress. I met her when she was getting ready for a talk, and while the audience was filing into the auditorium, she was giving us each cookies from this gigantic Tupperware container that she had baked the night before. I think they were like white and black chocolate chip cookies with raisins in them. They were incredible. And this is how she made her connection. So what we can learn from her example. And you can see a YouTube video of her giving this talk if you follow that link. What we can learn from this is to really express ourselves on stage and to address common topics in our own unique way that's authentic to ourselves. Let's all speak this way when we're on stage, and we can make this unique aspect of ourselves available to the program committee when we write proposals. So don't pretend to be somebody else. Really write the proposal in a way that shows who you really are. The final thing I'll say about topic selection is that there are not enough opinion talks at software conferences. A lot of people want to explain something that's very deeply technical, very advanced, kind of like proves how smart we are. But conferences are a great opportunity to kind of share ideas and advance the thinking of the field. So if you think that there is a software development technique that people aren't using often enough, or a leadership style or a management technique that should be more widely applied, if you've got a good argument for it, if it's really well constructed and it's really going to benefit people to hear your ideas, this is a great opportunity. And program committees like this kind of stuff because it means that the conference might actually accomplish something. It might be the beginning of a change for the better in the industry. So we like to see opinion talks about how to test your software better, how to teach young coders better, how to fix engineering interviews with a new technique. Any of this stuff is great, and because it's your personal opinion, it's likely to be a unique proposal among the entire batch. How are you going to actually fill out all of these empty fields in the CFP form, right? How do you overcome this writer's block? So the first field you've got to fill out is the title, and the title is hard. You want to use this as an opportunity to really figure out what you're going to say. So rather than being as vague as Python testing, you should do it. Be specific, like the best framework for Python testing is PyTest or something like that. Being vague and specific is an idea that I took from Hilary Mason. She writes that you should choose a title that is specific enough to actually communicate to the program committee what it is that you were going to say, but also to be vague enough that when you actually give the talk, which might be 4 or 5 months after you've written the proposal, that you've got wiggle room. The title's really the only thing that's going to be set in stone. If the committee accepts a talk with a given title, it's hard to ask them to change the title later on. Everything else, you know, your outline, your abstract, it can be just the rough draft, but the title's, you know, kind of making a commitment. So you don't want to commit to anything too specific. You want to find the sweet spot between specific enough to distinguish you and vague enough to give you wiggle room. You also want to avoid clichés. So there's a bunch of things that I'm really sick of seeing in proposals and in conference schedules. I think the worst of these is, you know, doing such and such for fun and profit. Everybody tries that. It doesn't really make your title any more entertaining to read. I think that Zen and the art of something is also really overused. Doing such and such at scale or demystifying such and such. All of these things are so overused. So don't fall back on that. It's a crutch. Come up with a title that is fun and engaging and unique, and also communicates what you're going to say. And a good way to get inspired for this is to read over the schedules of a few past years of the conference that you are proposing to. You'll start to get tired of some of the cliches, and you'll also see some examples of really great conference talk titles. That can inspire you to come up with something that is unique and funny and specific that's all your own. The next two entries in your proposal are the abstract and the outline. The abstract is usually, say, 200 or 300 characters. It's just a couple of sentences. And in there, you want to really demonstrate what you are going to talk about and what you are going to teach the audience. And then in the outline, you've got much more room. And there, you really want to be super thorough. The more detail you have in the outline, and if you add timings to every paragraph, if you say not just, I'm going to explain how to do something, but you actually say in the outline how to do something, that's going to prove that you've prepped. The committee will know that you know what you're going to say, and that will convince them that you're likely to give a good talk. It's probably best not to submit your first draft of the proposal directly to the conference. And this is why you shouldn't procrastinate. As soon as you see the CFP open, or if you even hear that a CFP is going to open, start thinking and start writing the proposal right away. So take a look at the CFP form, see what the proposal requirements are, like what are the names of the fields, how many characters are you allowed for your abstract, all of that stuff. That will give you time to draft and revise your proposal while the CFP is still open. And I think that the main thing that new speakers trip up on is that they write proposals that are too long, that will that don't look like something that you can actually explain in the time allotted. So you need to figure out what to cut. I think that most people don't need to introduce themselves. And I know that I violated this at the beginning of this workshop, but think about that. Like, during the period when I was talking about myself and who I am and why I know what I'm saying, was that really the most engaging portion of this workshop? Or are you more interested now when I'm explaining to you a technique that's hopefully useful for you that can advance your career? I think that introducing ourselves is usually a waste of time. And so if your proposal says at the top that, like, you know, the first 2 minutes are going to be introducing yourself, just delete it and give those minutes to the real content. You also don't want to explain the details of what you yourself built, because that's not the best way to teach the audience. Overall, what you really want to do when you're revising is to keep thinking about what is the audience going to gain from your talk, and then communicate that to the program committee in your proposal. What is the audience going to learn, and why will they have fun? The mnemonic that I have for this, I hope it's helpful for you, is that you don't want to show and tell. Instead, you want to explain and advise. Show and tell, it's like, it's what we did in first grade. We're proud of something that we've made, so we get up in front of the class and we show what we made and we tell them the story of how we made it. And a lot of people want to do that at conferences, but that's not the most valuable thing for the audience. Explaining how to do something and advising them about the best way to do it, that's what the audience will really gain the most from. The last field in CFP forms is usually notes to organizers. And they might say, like, this box is for you to say what AV requirements you have, or I don't know, whether you have any special scheduling constraints. But what you want to put here is more evidence that you're going to give a good talk. So again, if you've got YouTube videos of yourself speaking, that's best. And if you don't have that yet, you can make it happen. So you can find a meetup to speak at. It's a lot easier to get into meetups than conferences. Most meetups actually don't have enough speakers at all. And so if you simply offer to speak at a meetup, the meetup organizer is likely to accept you. And then try to get that recorded on video so that you can share that with the organizers here. Or if you don't have access to that, another thing you can do is just videotape yourself giving a talk to nobody, or invite a few colleagues to sit around while you give them a presentation and get that recorded. Any way that you can show your skill as a presenter, ideally videotaped, that's going to be golden. The program committee wants good proposals, and they want to help, and they're generally, they're volunteers, they're people just like you. When I was on the PyGotham program committee, we actually didn't get as much email from potential speakers as we would have liked to see. So if you're unsure about anything, reach out to the program committee, ask them for advice. For example, if you want to propose a talk, but you're not sure if it should cover like one subtopic or another subtopic, or you're not sure whether you should, whether they're interested in a particular framework or a particular specialty, go ahead and write them an email or tweet at them and ask them. It's likely to give you the kind of advice that will really make your proposal much more likely to get through once the CFP is closed. This is a process. Your first proposal isn't going to start you on your speaking career. And once you've started on your speaking career, that's not the end either, right? You are going to be writing proposals, filling out CFP forms, speaking at conferences for years. And you want to make this process efficient and refined. So every time you write a proposal, don't just click submit in the web form and let the proposal disappear from your life. Draft it in a document that you maintain and then reuse it for future conferences. It's fine to keep proposing the same thing to multiple conferences. Once you've given a talk a few times, then it's time to retire it. But it's fine to give a talk at, say, 3 or 4 conferences before you stop giving it. And even if you never give a talk based on a proposal at all, it may be recyclable. You may be able to use some of the ideas in that proposal for a more successful proposal later on. Or a good proposal is usually about half the work of getting it into an article. So you could rewrite it as a blog post and publish it on your own site or submit it to an online journal. All of these ideas that you are refining, they're useful, so don't waste them. Here's how I kind of organize my speaking repertoire. So you'll see that I've got 2 folders. This is my Google Docs. Tech Talks Retired. So these are talks that I've given enough that I don't think any conference is interested in them anymore, or I'm tired of them. There are also Tech Talk Rejects. This is the biggest folder because it's full of all of the proposals that I've offered to enough conferences that I now understand that this is just not a good idea. I may not understand why, but if I've given a proposal to a bunch of different conferences and all of them rejected it, then I figure that isn't a great idea and I need to stick it in rejects. Then at the top level of this folder, I've got a bunch of potential talks. So like extend LLDB with Python the hacky way. That's a specialized technical talk. I've got API evolution the right way. That's a more sort of general best practices talk. I've got my Barcelona keynote, which it's about not getting angry at people online. I think it's still a good idea, even though I've given it once already. So I'm reusing it as a proposal to other conferences. And so you can see I've got this whole repertoire of kind of actively proposed talks this year. And so every time I see a CFP open that I want to propose to, I can just look at what that conference is about, see which talks I might have drafted that would have a shot of getting into that conference, and then I can customize the proposal from there. You'll also see I've got at the bottom there, talks meta and talks resume. So talks meta, that's where I stick my like 3-sentence biography so that I can stick that into the notes to the organizers. And I've got my talks resume, which is a list of the talks I've given and links to videos of me speaking. And there I can sort of pick out the most relevant talks to convince the organizers that I'll be able to give a good talk at a conference like theirs. Now, the final subject for today is, once you've started to write proposals, how do you get better at doing it? And for me, the best thing that I've done so far is to join a program committee. Being inside that process makes me so much better at understanding what program committees are looking for and how they judge proposals. Program committees are always looking for volunteers. So when you see a CFP open, that tells you that a program committee has formed and that it's looking for help. So offer to join it. The other thing you can do is to ask for feedback. And this is another advantage of preparing your CFP, your proposals early before the CFP closes, is that you have time to ask friends to review your proposal. Take it with a grain of salt, right? They're not always right. And be prepared to be criticized, like, this makes no sense, or you can't spell. Seek out friends who are good critics and friends who understand software conferences. So people who have successfully proposed talks to conferences before, or at least served on a program committee or been to a lot of software conferences and kind of know what the norms of the community are. If you want to get yourself started, like I said, meetups are a great way to get going. Generally speaking, if you have a decent talk proposal and you are living in a large city with a tech community, you can find meetup organizers who are looking for people to give talks. There are not enough talks to go around. And this is a great way to get your experience and your resume built. And really, there's no silver bullet. Your first few proposals will likely be rejected. Mine certainly were. And even once you start to get going, once you start to build a better talk resume and get more experience writing successful proposals, even so, proposals, it's a very competitive field. The bigger the conference, the more people you're competing with. So you just need to keep trying and keep playing the numbers until you get into the conferences that you want to speak at. Now, I promised you prizes. I've got 2 prizes for you today for people who came to today's workshop. Now, prize number 1 is that the MongoDB world call for proposals has been extended just for you. My colleague Danielle James here at MongoDB, she is organizing a particular track at MongoDB World called the Women in Transcoders Lounge. MongoDB World is here in New York City in late June. And the Women in Transcoders Lounge is a place for technical talks as well as talks about advancing open source culture and our community. Now, technically, the CFP for this track is closed. But Danielle says that if you've come to this workshop, you can write her at danielle@mongodb.com, and the CFP is extended just for you. So the first thing you want to do is go to papercall.io/MongoDB World 2018, read what the lounge wants, read what the track is about, and find out what the requirements are for the proposal. But then don't actually fill out that form. Write your proposal to those standards and then just email it directly to Danielle and tell her that I sent you. Say that you were part of this workshop. The track is called Make It Matter, and your deadline is February 9th. So you've got less than a week to go, but it's enough time. This can be your beginning. And I've got a second prize for you. By the way, all of this information is at emptily/CFPs, so I'm going to go quick, but you won't lose access to this information. All right, prize number 2. I promised that if you get a proposal accepted, that I would offer you a way to actually give a good presentation, and here it is. So my personal speaking coach is an opera singer. Her name is Melissa Collins. She's here in New York. And she is an incredible public speaking coach for how to use your voice and your body, for how to tell a story. It's okay that she's not a computer programmer. She has done amazing things teaching me how to give technical talks. So the rules for this prize are, it's free for you. You can do it here in New York City face-to-face, or you can get on Skype with her. You have to submit a proposal after this workshop today. It's got to be accepted, of course, and I'm doing a 6-month timeout. So between now and 6 months from now, you have to get a proposal accepted. The first 4 people who get proposals accepted, email me directly, forward me the acceptance letter from the conference, and I will get you connected with Melissa. Okay? So good luck, everybody. Here is the link, again, to where to get all of this information about the 2 prizes, about where to find CFPs, about the link to Adrian Lowe speaking, the link to last year's workshop with Lacey Williams Henschel. Everything you need to know is on this page. Thank you very much for joining. So we're basically at the 1-hour mark, but I'm going to keep this open for a little bit, and please enter any questions that you have in the group chat. Thanks a lot. Hey, Messy Pixels and Avershal, thanks for joining me. I really enjoyed the opportunity to talk to you. I'm going to show you my face before I go. It's really nice to see everybody writing to me here. I'm glad that you were able to join, and I hope the best of luck for you. Somebody is asking about my email address again, so I'm going to show that. Here it is. It's jesse@emptysquared.net. And I'm going to hang out here on air for a couple of more minutes in case anybody types any questions into the chat window. So one question is, what should you do when you find out about a CFP the day it closes? That's unfortunate. It can't hurt to try to propose a talk. But what's best to do really is to prevent this from happening. And the 2 ways to do that are, first of all, follow that link to my CFP's info page. And it's really possible to basically know about every open CFP in your specialty. There's really not that many. There's a few dozen conferences going on every year in your field. So it's totally possible to know about all CFPs shortly after they open. The other thing to do to prevent this from being a problem is to build up your repertoire ahead of time, like I showed you. So if you have your proposals pre-written for previous conferences that you've proposed to, then if you find out about a CFP and you've only got hours to submit it, that's okay because all you have to do is adapt a proposal that you've already written. Dinara is asking, do conference committees provide feedback on rejected proposals? Normally, what I have seen is that they don't automatically provide feedback, but you can ask them. And that was very useful for me in my first year proposing to conferences. So the first time I proposed to PyCon, I proposed essentially a show and tell talk, which was about some software that I'd written that I thought was interesting. And they rejected it. And so I wrote back to the organizer and said, if you have time, I would really appreciate it if you let me know what I can do to improve in the future. And they did, in fact, write back and say it seemed too specific for our conference attendees, which was exactly right. And I learned a very important fact out of that. And so the next year, I wrote a proposal not about the thing that I had made, but about the general concept of asynchronous programming. And that's the first one that was accepted. So I would say anytime you are rejected by a conference, do write to the program committee and very politely ask them if they can give you any advice for how to improve for next year. I'm going to hang out here for another minute, see if any more questions come up. By the way, there was a tip that I forgot to share with you. One of the tricky things, if you're not a very experienced speaker or proposer, is to figure out, if I write an outline, does it look like it's going to fit in the time slot or not? You might think that a 10-paragraph outline proves that it's super detailed, but then the program committee will be concerned that you've got too much material to fit the time slot. And we are very concerned about speakers being cut off in the middle. That really doesn't give the audience the best value. But then on the other hand, if your proposal is too short, it might make people concerned that you didn't prepare enough or you don't know what you're going to say. So a good way to kind of eyeball this is to watch talks. I really recommend PyCon because I think it's got some of the highest average talk quality. And write an outline of what the speaker said, essentially like try to reconstruct what their proposal might have been. What you'll typically find is that the proposal outline would be shorter than you would expect. There's really not all that much that you can communicate to an audience in half an hour. So maybe 4 paragraphs of 4 or 5 sentences each for a half-hour talk is probably plenty. It's really only possible to effectively communicate a small number of ideas to an audience that's listening to you. So what you can write down has got to be really pretty short. The other thing that this is reminding me of is that a lot of conferences will offer multiple time slots. So PyCon might say, do you want a half-hour slot or a 45-minute slot? The long slots, there's very few of them, and they're extremely competitive. So generally speaking, don't shoot for them. Shoot for the shorter slots. There are more of them. They're less competitive. The organizing committee is much less concerned about the possibility of giving one to a speaker who might not be that experienced or reliable. So go for the short slots. Dinar is asking whether conferences help with travel expenses for speakers. They usually do not. There are 2 things that you can do about that. First of all, some conferences will, and so you can particularly seek out the conferences that do offer travel expenses. And I think that the Callback Women Twitter account, you should follow that. It gives Really good information about open CFPs, and Callback Women also is careful about tracking which conferences offer financial aid for travel expenses for speakers. The other thing you can do about that is that if a conference has a financial aid program in general, they will open that up to you, whether you're a speaker or attendee, but they'll probably give a little bit of extra priority if you have been accepted to speak at the conference. Somebody's saying that the Make It Matter link is broken. Okay, I will update that in a few minutes. Thank you for pointing that out. Vanessa asks, does your GitHub count in conference proposals? I would say that if you've written something that proves that you are skilled in the subject matter that you are proposing to talk about. So if you have a particular piece of software on GitHub that uses the tools that you want to give a talk about, then yes, share a link to that, and that will help to prove that you have expertise. But it's not really nearly so important as the fact that you've spoken before, or that your outline is thorough, or that your title is fun. Oh, Naren, thank you for sharing the correct link to Make It Matter. I will update that on my web page in a minute. Huh. And I also broke the link to Melissa Collins' site. I'm sorry about that. I'll fix that as well. Thank you. Okay, good. I am going to cut it off here. Thanks for everybody who stayed a little bit late to do the Q&A. I really appreciate that. And if you have any specific questions for me, you can tweet at me or you can email me directly, and I'll do my best to answer it. Thanks so much for joining me today. Goodbye.